Great, thanks everyone. And you are here at the EBRI. Everybody is welcome for EBRI series, evidence-based reading instruction. This is webinar one of several that you'll have an opportunity to be a part of this spring. And out of retirement, but not out of our hearts and minds, is Marn Frank. We are so glad she's able to join us for this today. There's Marn. And Christine Kelly is our English Language Arts coordinator. Hey, Christine, and I'll let Marn and Christine say a little more about themselves as we get started, but I actually can't stay today, but boy, you are in excellent hands. Thank you so much for being part of this work. Thank you, Marn and Christine, for taking the lead.
Well, again, welcome everyone, and thank you for your interest in EBRI. I say EBRI, other people might say EBRI, and from other states I hear EBRI. Although I retired from Atlas, I did not retire from EBRI. Shortly after retirement, I had opportunities to tutor. And so since 2021, I've tutored 4 children and 1 adult. And the advantage of this gig is that I get to put EBRI into practice. So instead of telling people about it, I'm doing it, and I'm further convinced of its impact on struggling readers' skills, interest, and confidence. Christine, anything you want to
add? Just that Marn and I were actually reverse. I taught EBRI for a long time, many years, and I am originally 7-12 language arts and K-12 reading, and the evidence-based reading that Marn has done is just wonderfully based on research. We have seen it work. I've seen it work with my own students of different levels. And I'm just really excited to have her back. And I'm wondering if, because we have someone from out of state, if this is now a national EBRI webinar. I think we could call it a national webinar. I'm going to go with that today.
All right. So throughout the slides, Christine and I will have our cameras off and on. We welcome any questions you have as we go through the slides, and Christine will be monitoring the chat and bringing those forward as needed. A sneak preview about what's coming in the series after today. In 2 short weeks, there'll be another webinar focused on diagnostic reading assessment. And Krista Coronado from Minneapolis Adult Education will be joining me. Webinar 3, 1 short week after that, focuses on alphabetic skills and routines. And Kim Munson from Theribolt will be joining me. Later in March, we'll have vocabulary, skills and routines with Christine again. Fluency, skills and routines in April. And then we'll conclude in May with comprehension, skills, and routines. So you are welcome to attend all of them or just some of them. It's up to you. You will get CEUs after each meeting.
So we're going to do a quick check-in, Friday check-in. And if you have used emojis in Zoom, great. If you haven't, there's 2 different ways you can use emojis. You can either go to the chat on your Zoom toolbar, open up the chat, and you'll see a smiley face. And when you click on that, you'll see a selection of emojis to choose. You can also go to reactions on your toolbar where you would raise your hand, for example, and there are 3 dots and you can click there and choose an emoji. So we absolutely welcome honesty. Not everything has to be a smiley face. I am not feeling the greatest, so I'm going to post something appropriate for that. So please just go ahead, and it will also remind you of your chat bar, because we're going to be stopping and doing several kind of metacognitive reflections today. And so you're really going to want to see what your colleagues are thinking about the content.
Yes, I was wondering about the yawns. There were several yawn emojis.
Thank you, everyone. These are great. I often see just smiley faces, so I appreciate the real emoji talk.
What we'll focus on this afternoon is, where does EBRI come from? What do STAR and EBRI look like? They are alike yet different. EBRI is actually the broader version, and STAR is more targeted. So hopefully I'll be able to make sense of that for you. We'll have a short break in between the first two bullets, and then we'll get into the 4 reading components and their fascinating 6 interrelationships. A really important feature of this entire series is the participant folder. Within the folder right now, there are 32 documents. I believe all of them are PDFs, and they are related to certain aspects of all 6 webinars, and possibly more will be added. I'll give you a sneak preview of that. So here's what it looks like. So there's a lot of testing resources, but there's also teaching resources. There's honest lists of challenges and solutions. And then a number of summary pages, 1 or 2 pages that outline the important features, mostly of the 4 reading components. And that will be chatted, if not already. And I believe it will be part of the after webinar email. This is a screenshot of the print resource that accompanies the webinars. I used to work from this resource back in the days of in-person. It follows the same sequence of content. So if you like something in print, this is available for you to print all or part of. This is another screenshot of the table of contents. So you can see there are many pages focusing on what is EBRI, and then diagnostic reading assessment, and then instruction in the 4 reading components. A really interesting part of this resource comes at the very end, where teachers shared their experience with EBRI across programs in the state, with both ABE and ESL students. So when you have time, I would at least take a look at it and then decide what you want to view electronically or print off. There are 3 sources of evidence that make the foundation of EBRI. The first is scientific reading research studies, and these are generally conducted by reading experts with higher degrees. They are usually affiliated with colleges or universities, and they occur across all levels and fields: learning disabilities, ESL, adult or adolescent literacy. Understandably, there are fewer in adult education because our students are challenged by regular attendance, and that's what's needed to make the findings reliable. So these experts collect data according to experimental processes and analyze with statistical methods. So it's very formal. Then, based on the data, they come up with findings and conclusions of their own, and then those are further scrutinized by other researchers from same or similar fields. And the question they answer based on the data is what worked. Eventually, they publish their findings and conclusions in reports, and they are further peer-reviewed and peer-approved before they are made public. The second source is professional wisdom, and this source fills in the gap of reading research with adult education populations. Again, by professional, we mean reading experts. So what they do is they look at research from other fields and they consider those findings, and they reach consensus on which are promising for particular populations of adult readers: beginning, intermediate, advanced, adult secondary. Those conclusions that they all agree upon are shared with the field, and as I said, fill in the gaps of the limited adult literacy research and answer the question, what will work? The best place to locate these publications are from links, the Literacy Information and Communication Network, which is literally a warehouse of resources that have been carefully curated by experts and teachers before they are placed in the library. Links also offers courses and webinars. So if you go to the homepage, this is what it looks like. And along the left side are many, many topics that you can click on, or you can enter a keyword or phrase. If I click on reading and writing, then I'm brought to this page, and you can scroll down to find what interests you. And I won't completely scroll. There's a lot there. There's a lot there that's worth looking at. What does it say? 114 results under reading and writing. The final source of evidence is practitioner wisdom, and this comes from you, teachers and managers in adult education. This wisdom is highly valued in Minnesota, I believe from the state down. What we observe, what we learn, what we talk about is of great value to other teachers. Often teachers are using diagnostic reading assessment, so that data helps them determine student profiles and plan instruction. And then they can take notes and observe students' engagement with materials and practices and answer the question, what did work? And then that is shared either through conversations or in print, newsletters, including what works, but also challenges and successes, teaching materials that are tried and true, curricula, websites, and platforms. Of course, the best place to find practitioner wisdom is from the Atlas website. So you would go to the reading, which is in one place called reading, and another place, our EBRI library. And so this is the reading library. Over to the right, you have topics. And so you go into those topics and you will see curated resources either by myself or Christine or others that have been very, very useful for teachers in the field. Okay, so we're going to do a poll that asks you what sources of evidence are most important for your work. So you can choose either the research studies, the professional wisdom, the practitioner wisdom, or all of the above.
Marn, we've got some answers coming in, although as a presenter, you may not be able to see it quite yet. Just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, I can see it.
People answer. Oh, you can. Great.
Yep. And I'm not surprised by what I see.
Okay, it looks like just about everyone has participated. Now we have everybody, so I'll end the poll.
So like I said, I'm not surprised that you value each other in terms of evidence, or that you value all of the above, parts of all of the above. And that would be the one I would pick also, is all of the above. The key practices for teachers are important to not only see, but hear. And these are those practices that Christine and I mentioned we've seen success, as have many other teachers across the state and the country. The first one is about informally assessing or teaching or testing students to determine their reading strengths and needs beyond TABE and CASAS. TABE and CASAS are designed to measure the end product of reading comprehension. They do not assess alphabetics, fluency, or vocabulary. So that is the process. And it's important to know the breakdowns in all 4 reading components, not just a comprehension score, because that's how you can make a difference. Is finding out where those breakdowns occur and then getting in there with individuals or groups and teaching them what they need to know. So then you would use that data to form groups and plan lessons based on the needs or priorities. The needs would be everything. The priorities would be what's most important and what do I have the capacity to do. Then you would provide explicit instruction, which is a 4-step process that is important beyond reading, writing, math, most subjects. The first step is explanation, where you talk about why you are starting this lesson or this set of lessons, what will happen, and how you will engage them. Then you provide modeling, where you show how to do the skill. and you make sure they're understanding how you, as a reader, put this skill in place. So that's the I do. Then you move to guided practice, where you bring in students with you. This probably takes several lessons of we do before you move into application, which is where they're working independently. And then as they're working independently, you monitor so that you can be confident when it's time to move on. You are careful in what you select to teach. So based on what other teachers have found successful or experts have found successful, you pick best practice techniques, strategies, and materials. And then ultimately, you organize reading routines. And again, you monitor progress and adjust as needed. So a reading routine is really, it's not the end goal, but if you're new to this, it's what you're working towards.
Marn, could I interrupt for a moment? We have a couple questions in the chat box that I know we can answer well, from participants who are asking for free assessments, in particular for alphabetics, vocabulary, and fluency, and where they can find them.
You can find them in the participant folder. You can also find them on the Atlas website. So all the tests that I will talk about at webinar 2 are free, or certain passages can be requested from Christine. So she has to assure that you are part of Minnesota Adult Basic Ed in order to share these copyrighted passages that we have permission for. And what was the other question?
They were both about that, so that's why I wanted to ask.
Okay.
And I have my copy here of evidence-based reading instruction. This is what Marn showed, and this is really worth looking at because you'll find these free assessments that have been tested and are tried and true in our system.
Yeah, they're very easy to find. They're probably on the Links website too, I'm not sure, but for sure they're in the companion EBRI book and on the Atlas website. I see a comment about Words Their Way, and yes, they have a spelling inventory. Teresa Fisher from Buffalo, that's what she uses to test alphabetics. So I think Words Their Way is still of value, even though it has been around for a long time. Okay. STAR is particular to a certain population, and it is the ideal way to deliver evidence-based reading instruction. However, it takes a lot of extra time, staff, and materials. So even though we hold it up there as STAR Bright, EBRI Light is really the focus of this series. But so that you understand STAR, teachers are expected to conduct 3 to 4 assessments with low, high, intermediate, or advanced ESL readers. And the reason for expecting that many assessments is that this population has shown to be very complex. And they might have needs across all 4 components or priorities across all 4. So the STAR model is intended for this population. Once the teacher has the data from those assessments, then he or she uses the results to group, plan, and deliver instruction in all components of need or priority. Not just one, unless that is the need, but in all components of need or priority. So within a STAR classroom, you might have 4 groups within a 1.5 to 2 hour class, 4 groups for each of the components. And then sometimes within the component, especially fluency, you might have more than 1 group. The explicit instruction is the same, so that practice is the same, as is selecting materials, strategies, and techniques, as is organizing routines. The routines for STAR, as I mentioned, tend to be quite complicated, but they become doable and they become routine. So students know, teachers know, volunteers know how it works. And routines ultimately save time. They save teacher time, and they also give students the knowledge of what happens, the comfort of knowing what happened. So they aren't wondering what the lessons will look like. They're familiar with the routines. EBRI Lite might be more real for your classroom. Of course, we want everyone to do STAR, but over the years, we realized that was not practical, and we did not want to exclude anyone from the trainings. So within EBRI, the expectation is just a couple of assessments, 1 to 2, beyond TASIS or TABE. And it's a broader population of beginning, intermediate, and advanced ABE ESL readers, because what we found again over the years is that many of the practices suited this broader population quite well. That data is again used to group plan and deliver instruction in the primary reading components of need. So for many beginning readers, the focus is on alphabetics and fluency. With intermediate, it might be fluency, vocabulary, comprehension. And beyond that, it might be vocabulary and comprehension. The other 3 practices are the same. So the differences are between the number of assessments and the target population. Any questions on that? Or Christine, other comments?
We did have a question about how long STAR has been around. I know that we've been involved in it since 2007, 2008, but it's older than that, isn't it?
I think it goes back a couple years when they were piloting it with certain states. I don't know exactly which states participated as pilots. I'm thinking maybe 2007, 2006, 2007. So we had STAR in Minnesota. Well, we still have STAR in Minnesota, but we were doing trainings through the pandemic. So we started trainings in 2008, 2009, and we finished with trainings, not every year, became every other year through 2021. And that pandemic year was really, really challenging. But we got everybody through. I mean, we had 28 participants and we got everybody through with a lot of modifications.
Yes, it's a very intensive experience.
Yes, it is. It is, but worth it. I mean, I think Christine and I were in the first cohort, and yeah, I was convinced early on that this was what Minnesota needed. Okay, Christine has done some checking with STAR programs across the state. And so she's going to share what people told her about what their STAR looks like now.
And I think that it's really a testament to how much teachers have embraced STAR and EBRI in Minnesota. I sent out just a handful of targeted emails and just immediately got responses back from teachers who were excited to talk about what they're doing. So one of those programs was Metro South, and they've been doing STAR and EBRI for some time, and they're doing it at a variety of levels. I also want you to note, as we quickly go through these examples, all the different levels that this work is happening on. So EBRI is being incorporated into advanced classes. High intermediate classes are working directly with fluency using techniques, EBRI techniques, words to learn by. That's very popular for vocabulary. They have a Saturday class, and they use intermediate word study, which is another free resource that Marn developed that's available on the Atlas website. So we've been very fortunate to have a lot of resources, free resources to support this work. And that's ABE low intermediate and ABE high intermediate. The
Yes,
next
Metro South was one of the first programs to participate. Yeah. And so they sent more teachers across the years.
And the next example, West Metro, and you heard Marn talk about Teresa. She does a standalone STAR class, and she works with all of the reading components: alphabetics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. One of the things that we talk about with alphabetics is syllabication rules. And these, I use these with my GED students, and some people said, but they seem like they're more for kids and how to separate words. My GED students loved it because it helped with their spelling, and it helped them break up multi-syllable words, big words. And so they saw the immediate relevance. Teresa has all ELL levels in family literacy, and they work with more free resources, teaching analogy phonics, mega words, which is an oldie but a goodie resource. And she gives the word reading diagnostic reading assessment with her intermediate ABE, mostly with GED goals. She has an open lab, and she's already tested more than half of the students using the word reading test and the word meaning test. And these are tests we talk about that are available in that participant folder that Marn refers to.
So the word reading tests how well students read leveled lists of words. That would be for alphabetics. And then the word meaning test is an oral test where you're asking students to tell you what words mean, which is a vocabulary test.
Next, we have Rosemount, Eagan, Apple Valley. I was just there with this group yesterday. And vocabulary is a really big focus with their high-level ELL and GED students. They use explicit instruction that we've gone into with vocabulary instruction by introducing the words in a very specific way, very direct instruction, and then taking students through a variety of activities that build in complexity. And I love this. One of this I would always do, the have you heard the vocabulary word over the weekend. I love those discussions. It's important that we ask students to come in and tell us where they hear words. And what's great about that is they'll stop thinking of words as necessarily academic, and they'll realize I heard it on the radio, I heard it in a movie I was watching, or on a TV show. And it shows them again that relevance of the words that we teach.
Now, they also branch reading with writing, I see at the end, where they put the words into a paragraph.
Yes, I've done that. And that is a really nice reading writing connection. At that point, students should be fairly comfortable with those target words. And they do assessments where students have to spell the vocabulary word and then create a sentence to show mastery of the word. The next slide has more Rosemount, Eagan, Apple Valley examples, because they were just really excited to tell me what they're doing. Words to learn by again, and the STAR method of teaching. Vocabulary, again, that very explicit direct instruction of introducing the word and then taking students through a variety of activities that increase in complexity. They love the knowledge rating chart. This is a way, it's a pre-teaching technique where students can identify their knowledge of the word, anywhere from I've never seen this word before to I know this word. And it's a great formative assessment tool. It's a great pre-teaching tool, but it also can show students how their word knowledge is growing. Again, mega words 1 and 2 for alphabetics. Fluency, they focus on STAR aspects of fluency, which I assume would be accuracy and rate and prosody, and they use a variety of resources. And they work on comprehension as well. So they're working with all 4 components of EBRI here. And in their low intermediate ESL class, again, that method of direct vocabulary instruction and daily fluency work. And in addition, they're building the fluency work into other activities throughout the class. And that's one of the great things about STAR and EBRI. And I'll tell you about a Minneapolis example here in a moment. But if you have students reading in your class, even if it's a science themed class or a family literacy class or a career pathway class, you can incorporate these techniques. Minneapolis, and Lenka Bragg just presented on this at Language and Literacy Institute. She takes the STAR techniques, particularly fluency and instruction, and she builds them right into her social studies class. So these are students who are preparing for high school equivalency, and the focus is on social studies, but she is integrating the strategies right in with the content. So they're actually learning how to read social studies text and academic vocabulary that will help them read more social studies text as they work with her. And also something that I heard about recently that they are doing when they get some lower level readers entering the program. Some of the teachers are going beyond a simple CASAS or TABE score because that's a very narrow view of what a student can do. And it's a narrow view of the strengths. It really is not much of a view of their strengths and weaknesses. So they're doing diagnostic reading assessment to get a more thorough picture of these students before placing them into instruction. So it's kind of a big picture. They're getting as much data as they can, which is a great way to use DRA along with our required testing.
And Krista Coronado, who's joining me for webinar 2, she has done probably more diagnostic reading assessment than any teacher in the state. So
Yes,
she has a lot of experience about what works and what doesn't work when it comes to assessment.
yeah. So a lot of really wonderful work that continues to go on, and just a couple really wonderful quotes from teachers who use EBRI and STAR. I think this is a really powerful quote about the progress students make. So working with tier 2 words, which are what we consider to be these academic words that appear, they're very high utility. Working with her ELL 5 class, as she's teaching the level above that, and she's had students move up, she's seeing anecdotally that they're doing better in ELL 6 after receiving that explicit vocabulary instruction in the level before. And this is why it's great for teams of teachers to meet about how they are incorporating STAR and EBRI strategies and instruction, because it can really build. The other one just came in recently to me, and I think it just talks about what we wanted, what we hoped for, is that it becomes second nature. And this Minnesota adult ed teacher said that STAR EBRI instructional methods are important in all my classes. I use them without thinking these days, which is essentially, I mean, that's the great thing, is it just becomes a part of what you do in the classroom.
And I think it reflects on routine also. It becomes routine for the teacher and the students. Christine, if any participant might want to observe a STAR or EBRI class, is there a way we can make that happen?
I'm sure we can. I know some, especially now when there are teachers who are teaching virtually. That is one nice thing from COVID. If there was anything, that it's a little bit easier to observe. And I would certainly reach out to teachers that I know and help a participant set that up. It's to see it in action is really worthwhile.
It is. And during that pandemic year, I entered virtual classes, and it was almost as good as being in the classroom in person. I was surprised. So if it would be easier for you to observe virtually, that is a possibility too. Yes, so let Christine know there are so many stellar teachers in Minnesota that we can line up some observation if you're interested. I observed during my tenure over 100 Minnesota STAR teachers. It was the best part of the job, is to go in the classroom quietly and try to be like a little mouse in the classroom, watch what was being implemented, and then sit down with the teachers and talk about what worked well, and what could you make a little bit better. And it ended positive, I think, from my perspective, for all of the teachers.
So we're going to take a quick break, but before we're stopping, much like it's good to stop with our own students to check in and get them thinking about their thinking. So we've provided 2 stems here. You can choose one of them and go ahead and chat in the chat box, either something that you've heard that resonates, like, oh yeah, this makes sense to me, or this is true, and I've seen this in my practice, or something that you're puzzling over about information that Marn has shared or that I have shared. So we can take a moment, open up your chat box so that you can see what your colleagues have to say, but just checking in on what you're thinking right now. Something that resonates. Yes, I'm going to read some of these because we are recording this webinar, and then people who watch it can also hear reflections from participants. So yes, this idea that TABE and CASAS do not give the full picture. I think a lot of us think, yes, we know that. Resonating, integrating STAR EBRI into like social studies or another content, absolutely. Using diagnostic reading assessment to round out our understanding of our students beyond these NRS tests, yes. Wondering how to find the starting point, really strong work. Yep, good. You already see components of this, so this is resonating, Deb. Wondering how much room we have to be more intentional. Great. Couple more before we go on to break. This is a great question. If a teacher doesn't have volunteers every day, is it hard to use groups for the 4 STAR components? Is EBRI more for advanced students and STAR is for lower levels? That's a really good question. Doing STAR virtually. I had to do STAR virtually that whole year. And that was interesting. I learned a lot. Anne says something that resonates with me is how valuable it could be. The more data we gather, the better fit, I think, when we place students. Marn, did you want to address those couple questions or wait until after the break?
Sure. Yeah, they're related to the extra staffing, as I see. So,
yeah, and also the STAR or EBRI, how they kind of work together.
Right,
yep, here's
right.
another one. Something I'm puzzling over is whether a trained tutor can conduct DRA or if it must be a trained teacher. My educational assistant loved to do diagnostic reading assessment. Marn can talk more about that because she's actually done trainings for volunteers and educational assistant and paraprofessionals.
Okay, so we'll check back after the break then.
Thank you so much for your questions and your reflections. So should we take a couple of those questions?
Yeah.
I think probably the first one, the quickest one, is the question that Michael asked: is EBRI for more advanced students and STARS for lower levels? How do those fit together?
STAR is targeted for low, high, intermediate ABE and advanced ESL. EBRI in Minnesota, EBRI might look different in another state, but in Minnesota, we've broadened EBRI to be across beginning, intermediate, advanced, and sometimes even into adult secondary, as you've mentioned. That makes sense?
Yes, in particular, having taught GED prep for many years, even with adult secondary students who are above, often finding that they lack academic vocabulary and they lack strategies, comprehension strategies for reading informational text in particular. And so I hate to put, parameters sometimes when it really depends on how well you know your students and what their needs are. The other questions involve, the other question, two questions. Is it hard to use groups for the 4-star components if you don't have a volunteer every day? And I think this presupposes that you're actually doing all 4 at the same time.
And that's not the expectation of EBRI, that you address all 4 components. That's the expectation of STAR, which involves a much more intense training. So what we're hoping you will do is determine a couple of components of priority and focus on those. And you can alternate groups. You don't have to plan, if you're focusing on alphabetics and fluency, to have lessons for those 2 components every single day. You can alternate. So it's a flexible schedule, is what I'm getting at. It's what you have the capacity and the staffing and the ability to do. And it'll make a difference, even on a small scale, it will make a difference.
The last question, which I know you can definitely say something to this. Who can do DRA? Could a trained tutor conduct DRA, or does it need to be a trained teacher?
Teachers would be the preference, but teachers don't always have the time to conduct diagnostic reading assessment. So I have trained many volunteers. It has to be made clear to the volunteer that they are signing up to learn how to test rather than teach. I've had a couple of volunteers who were surprised at the focus of the training. So make sure the volunteer is willing and interested to do some testing. Sometimes they make great testers because they're not quite as invested in the students. By that I mean, they just handle marking correct or incorrect a lot easier sometimes because they're not worried about what they've taught or not taught those students. That makes sense? I mean, they're volunteers, so they'll come in, they'll do the best they can, and it will be helpful. It will be very helpful.
Yeah, there were times with my educational assistant, Deanna, where we would calibrate and we would both together do a DRA with a student and then compare. And there were a few times in the beginning where I'd say, oh, but I've heard the student read aloud in class and I really think, it should be this number. And she'd say, based on what we just heard in this assessment, this is where the student goes. And I'm like, you're right. You're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. And so there can definitely be some benefits. I loved doing DRA, and Krista will tell you that she loves it. And if you attend the session that she's co-presenting. I'm sure she can answer a lot of questions about DRE.
And yes, you get a grade level, but the grade levels form the groups. And so a group is a range of grade levels. You're not teaching students at alphabetics level 1 separate from grade level 2 or grade level 3. You can group that range into one group. Same with 4 to 8. You can group them together. And that's true for vocabulary. And fluency also, you work with a range, same for comprehension. So it's not, it can be done individually, but the expectation is not individualized instruction. This graphic of reading is one of my favorites. And if I think a student can understand it, I will share it with them, and I have definitely shared it with parents. And so front and center is reading, meaning the product of reading, understanding intended meaning. But you can't accomplish reading without the interconnectedness of the 4 reading components. They all are a part of that product, and they make up the process. Another way to understand the 4 reading components is to pair them as skills. So looking across, the word skills are considered alphabetics and vocabulary, because for alphabetics, you're reading words. You're reading them quickly and correctly. For vocabulary, you're recognizing words. You're saying a word or you're hearing a word, and hopefully you're connecting that with your spoken language. Fluency and comprehension are the text skills, because with fluency, obviously you're reading text. And text can be phrases, it can be sentences, it can be passages, it can be articles, it can even be books. Comprehension, of course, also involves reading text, the focus being on understanding, whereas fluency is focused on reading words correctly in phrases and with some expression. Looking down, alphabetics and fluency are paired as the print skills. And these tend to be the focus of more beginning into intermediate instruction. They're both about reading, one about reading words and the other about reading text. Vocabulary and comprehension are the meaning skills, recognizing words, and then understanding text. Looking more closely at the print skills, and this again will be the focus of webinar 3, where we spend the entire hour and a half on alphabetics. Alphabetics is a long and wide continuum. So from the beginning, it starts with knowing and using basic print concepts that we read left to right, top to bottom. It also includes knowing the names of the 26 alphabet letters. Phonological awareness is the ability to hear language and play with language, with words and sounds. Moving on is the phonics, where letter sound patterns are taught in a logical sequence, and alongside helping students read and spell mostly one-syllable words. Once students have mostly mastery of phonics, Then they can move into more advanced alphabetics, which is learning those chunks, as Christine mentioned earlier. The chunks being syllables, prefixes, roots, or suffixes. Instead of seeing a long word as just a string of letters, really the only way that you can decode it is within those chunks. So becoming more familiar with the chunk patterns helps students read and spell multisyllable words and connect them to their spoken language. There's a diagram that I will share at webinar 3 that shows this continuum across kindergarten through 8th grade. So that's how long and wide it can be, beginning with print concepts and going all the way to roots, Latin and Greek roots. Fluency can also start very basic or small with reading letter names fluently, knowing the names of the 26 alphabet letters quickly and correctly, and then saying the sounds, the taught sounds quickly and correctly, moving into word lists, phrases, and short texts. At higher levels, when you're working with longer texts, fluency involves reading most of the words correctly. In fact, the goal is 90 to 95% correct. At an efficient speed or rate that's not too slow and not too fast, and could be unique for each reader. Meaningful phrases is another chunking strategy. Our brains can only hold on to so many chunks, so many units at one time. So learning to read in phrases supports memory of text and understanding. And then the last dimension of fluency to develop is expression. Rising and falling of the voice, adding emotion to what you're reading. Most beginning intermediate students do not have much expression in their reading, but with modeling, they will acquire it. I see that with my 2 elementary students, one's in 4th grade and one's in 6th grade. And neither of them had much expression at first. So when I model, I hear them intentionally mimic how I'm reading. And we both agree, it makes it much more interesting. Any questions, Christine, or other comments?
Nope, not at this time.
We'll take a closer look at the meaning skills from this slide. Vocabulary, that will be covered extensively in webinar 4, is also a continuum that crosses tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 1 being the basic, familiar, everyday concrete words that make up most of spoken language. Beyond that is tier 2, which are more academic and abstract, and they begin appearing more and more in materials at grade level 4 and above. And they aren't necessarily as common in spoken language. Tier 3 are the subject-specific words, words that are important to know about social studies or science contexts. So they're not everyday, they are much more specialized. So it's important that we, number one, identify where to start teaching students across the tiers, and then over time, address those tiers. However, tier 3 is best addressed within the context, not lists of words, but within the context that's being read. Comprehension is about reading text, which could be visual or audio or print, closely to determine key details, examples, inferences, main ideas, or themes. Also to describe connections or relationships between persons, events, steps, ideas, or concepts. Now, in the early days of STAR, we used to say, hold off on comprehension until alphabetics, fluency, and vocabulary are more established. But now we know from CCRS that comprehension is for everybody. It's not a hold off. It needs to be brought in even to the simplest of texts. Christine, do you want to walk through the commonalities between my descriptions and the CCRS reading standards?
Yeah, so when CCRS started later on, around 2014, we got into discussions about how CCRS and STAR or EBRI fall together, and they fall together very nicely in many places. In the CCRS, the College and Career Readiness Standards, the Blue Book, there is a section called Reading Foundational Skills, and that is the part of the book that talks about these alphabetic skills and understanding the phonics, phonemic awareness, the fluency. And I am going to ask, though, Marn, because this was a decision that you thought was really important. In the Blue Book, if you look, you will not see the RF1 standard there as far as demonstrating the understanding of organization and basic features of print. But Minnesota made a decision to add that back in. Do you want to say something about that?
And that came from ESL teachers with students at very basic levels who said, we can't really start with RF2. Our students need skills before that. And so that's why we decided to pull those in, is it recognized that, yeah, we have a wide variety of students and levels and first languages in our state.
Okay. The next slide talks about some of the key reading standards, the reading anchors. We talk level C is kind of an ESL, high intermediate, low intermediate, high intermediate, ABE. These are kind of the original populations. But we've seen them go down. We've seen them go up, certainly with EBRI beyond these levels. But when we talk about a lot of the strategies that we that are part of EBRI or STAR that we focused on in Minnesota, they really are around, main ideas and details, students being able to read and pull those things out. Some inferencing, definitely vocabulary is a key piece, because vocabulary is actually a pretty substantial part of the ELA standards. Text structures and being able to describe, the text structures. There's a piece on that as far as compare, contrast, or cause and effect, and how important that is in being able to comprehend a text and explain how ideas develop. And so there's a nice overlap. I would say that in recent years, STAR has expanded into getting into identifying arguments and evaluating arguments, which of course is an important standard 8 in the reading anchors. What's really important to know, though, is that we don't need students to master the reading foundational skills before they work on the reading anchors. So students are working on phonics, students are working on fluency, but they are also making inferences. They're also determining a main idea. They're also, the text structure can be as simple as making sure students know that there is a beginning, a middle, and an end to the story. So no matter how it looks, we do want students to be working on comprehension skills or tapping into them. You may not be formally at low levels teaching reading strategies, but definitely developing that thinking, because they're adult students and it's different than with kids. My sister's own kindergarten classroom, she does a book and students predict and infer and they summarize and they do different things, and it's a little bit more informal sometimes, but we want to make sure that they're simultaneous rather than building upon each other.
I think it's time to move into the fascinating interrelationships. So the next 2 slides describe the 6 relationships from a must perspective, meaning students must do this in order for that. Following these 2 slides, we have an activity where I give you an example of what you might observe in your classroom, and then you try to figure out the interrelationship. So the first interrelationship is between alphabetics and fluency, where readers must read words accurately and automatically in order to read text fluently. So you can't be fluent if you're not able to get the words off the page correctly and quickly. You lose the fluency. So your slow, labored reading is an example of this. The second is between alphabetics and vocabulary, where readers must know word parts. We're talking about from sounds and letters all the way through Latin roots to decode and recognize meanings of words, because it gives them the skills to get the words off the page and then again, hopefully connect to their spoken language. The third one is between fluency and comprehension. I have heard fluency described as the bridge to comprehension, where readers must read text accurately at an efficient rate and in phrases to understand meaning. It's that hanging on to a fair number of units in order to carry the meaning to the end of the sentence or the end of the paragraph. Vocabulary to alphabetics means readers must have familiarity with words to decode, recognize, or self-correct. So students have to have exposure to a variety of words to understand how to say them and what they mean in order for this interrelationship to occur. It also helps them self-correct. So if they're reading along and they read the wrong word, if they read more, they might recognize, no, it can't be that word, and self-correct. And that's huge. That's a very important skill. Vocabulary to comprehension is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, interrelationship, where if readers don't know word meanings, they lose text meaning. If a student doesn't know 1, 2 words in a sentence, they're not going to be able to figure out the text meaning. And then finally, between comprehension and vocabulary. If students struggle to understand meaning, they have difficulty learning new words from text. It all just gets jumbled. And it can become a reader's paradox, where because they don't know words, they don't read. And because they don't read, they don't have the opportunity to learn words. So here's how the poll works. I am going to read the classroom situation or the reader situation aloud to you to give you time to think. And then you will pick one of the three interrelationships. And then Christine or Marisa will launch the poll after that short read and think time. Question 1. A reader typically hurries through text at a too fast pace. He makes a lot of word errors, ignores punctuation marks, and does not read in meaningful phrases. He often complains, "I don't understand what I read." Fluency to comprehension is the correct answer. Excellent, excellent. Question 2, and it will be different. It won't be that same interrelationship. A reader has avoided reading books and even short articles on her own for many years. She has developed a dislike of reading because there's too many hard words, and she can't be expected to know. Well, I think you'll be happy to know that it could be either vocabulary to comprehension or comprehension to vocabulary. So both are correct. Question 3. A reader can usually get the beginning or first syllable of words, but struggles to sound out the middles and endings. And this is a very common pattern for more advanced alphabetics. In addition, he often does not recognize what words mean in isolation or context. Excellent. The correct answer is alphabetics to vocabulary. You're doing very well, considering I felt like it was kind of a rush job through those first 2 slides. Question 4. A reader often asks for the meaning of words used orally or in text. He also spends a lot of time looking up word meanings in a dictionary. By the time he struggles to the end of a text, he's completely lost the intended meaning. Vocabulary to comprehension is the correct answer. Question 5. A reader has a habit of guessing and mispronouncing many longer words in text. She does not recognize her errors as misreads and won't attempt to correct them by sounding out the decodable parts or chunks. Perfect. Vocabulary to alphabetics. And last but not least, a reader struggles to sound out and read many words in text. He needs a lot of teacher prompting or gentle correction to get from the beginning to the end. He reads slowly, unevenly, and is often very frustrated or discouraged. Alphabetics to fluency is the correct answer. I am super impressed with how well responders did. I think what's so fascinating about these interrelationships is once you gain a better understanding of what they look like, how to teach them, how to identify needs, and then you put it into practice, these interrelationships pop up all the time. You just really see what they mean with individual students, or sometimes within groups of similar students. Did you want to add anything, Christine, before we move on?
No, just really impressed. And I remember the first time I worked with some of these interrelationships, I kept thinking in my head, for each one, I know a student who does this, like immediately picturing students who struggle with these interrelationships. So I'm wondering if teachers did too, if you had certain students in mind.
Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't know that unless you did some extra assessment or had an understanding of the components and could pick that up.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We want to make sure that you get one additional opportunity here when we have a few minutes left. This is great information for you to see from your colleagues. It's great information for us as well, as we see your takeaways and the questions. So please, in the chat box, finish one of these sentence stems, your biggest takeaway today, or a question that you still have. And then we'll briefly talk about what's coming up. Good. CCRS standards meld well with EBRI. They are not separate things, which CCRS goes higher and in some other places. But if you're doing evidence-based reading instruction or STAR, you are hitting CCRS standards.
And it took us a long time to get there. Yeah,
I remember there were graphics that we were creating to capture.
Yeah. So another impressive thing is someone has put that together. Tamara has put that together so well, because it took us at State Leadership a long time to see how they were related.
Kelly says her biggest takeaway is she's excited for the rest of the series.
Great.
So she can learn more. That's awesome. Biggest takeaway, interrelationships from Doretta. And my biggest takeaway is that every work will benefit every learner in our program. That's a great takeaway.
And there are some programs, some large programs in the state where EBRI is across levels, where they have been through trainings and worked together to implement EBRI for beginning, intermediate, advanced. And as Christine mentioned about Lenka's presentation, even into GED.
We've got takeaway, being able to diagnose my students' reading problems would be great. It would help me and help you provide more effective instruction for students. Great review of interrelationships of reading components. That's Trudy, and a great job, everyone, on recognizing those interrelationships. Danielle, my biggest takeaway is I'm excited to learn more from the rest of the series. It's excellent. And Deb, simply complex. It is, like so many things we do in adult education, right? Our jobs are complex, but lots of resources have gone into linking evidence-based resources to support learners. We have lots of work to do, but we've got some really good things done. Donald has a question. How to assess virtual student reading assessment. Oh, you're going to talk about that in the next one with your EDRA series, right? Right.
We do have slides for assessing alphabetics and fluency and comprehension. So if that is the way you want to or have to do it, we have Google Slides for doing that.
Yes. And Michael says, I'm hoping my questions will be answered in the next webinars. Please, if they're not, keep asking them. Feel free to email me. I am happy to answer questions or get an answer. And a couple things here, if you want to go to the next slide, Marn.
Well, I think we've presented what will be at webinar 2. So the only thing that I want to point out is all we're going to have time for is the tests for word reading and fluency. But before vocabulary and comprehension, I will share what those tests look like.
One more question, and I'm going to ask that in just a second, but for those of you, look at your chat box. There is a link Marisa posted to register for any or all of the other upcoming EBRI webinars. There is a link to the evaluation, and once you complete the evaluation, which is very, very valuable to us, you will get your CEUs for today. And the final question is, what is the proper term, phonics or alphabetics?
Some people would use them interchangeably. In my head, phonics is more about letter sound patterns. And advanced alphabetics, so that would be beginning alphabetics, and advanced alphabetics is the chunks for multi-syllable decoding. But it's used, yeah, they are used interchangeably. It's kind of how the person sees it. I like to separate them because I want teachers to understand how they are different and what the assessments tell us about where to start with students. Well, if you have other questions, both Christine and I are willing and ready to answer them. Thank you so much for being here. It's a crash course, especially this first webinar. We tend to cram a lot of information into each webinar, but hopefully give you enough skills and materials to get started. And that's my goal, is that you will find something that you want to try on behalf of your students and move forward with that.
So hope to see you. It sounds like you've got a core group forming here. Please, if you have any colleagues that you think would really benefit moving forward, make sure to tell them to register. You'll be hearing from different practitioners and hearing about some concrete strategies and a lot of good things coming. So thank you so much.